Welcome to Taking Care of Business on News Talk 1180 KERN for the best in Saturday talk radio at 1 o'clock and on 1230 KGEO at 10 o'clock Saturday, and for the best in Wednesday talk radio on 1410 KERI, the Christian station, and now on 1000 KKIM in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Your host is Clay Koerner, and I'm Marty Pay, and our producer is Greg Held. Hey, Greg is back. I wanted to thank Rocky for a great job while Greg was gone, so... Greg, we're glad to have you back. Clay, we had an incredible show last week with combat historian Patrick O'Donnell talking about his books. I've already started one of them.
I'm glad you did. Is it the picture book?
No, well, no, it's books on tape. That's about the only time I have. In the second half, we had a heartwarming interview with Tara O'Grady, whose dad is a POW in Vietnam. Deceased POW. We know where he's buried, and they will not go back to get the body, and that's a travesty. They really, really owe it to the family to do that, so they can have some closure after all this time. Well, in the second half today, we've got a former guest, Rabbi Gantz, who wrote a great book on the Talmud and its relationship to family values. But he's made some controversial statements about Iran lately, so we're going to talk to him about that.
Who do we have today?
Today, in the first half, we have a very, very special guest I've been waiting to talk to for a long time. The former president of the Family Research Council from 1988 to 1999. He served in the Reagan administration for 8 years. And then he took a run at the presidency, running in the Republican Party as a potential candidate. Did pretty good in Iowa, if I remember right. And he's now the current president of American Values, Gary Bauer. Gary, welcome to Taking Care of Business.
Well, thank you. Great to be with you guys.
Thanks for taking the time to come on the show this morning. There's so many different topics we can cover with you. But I wanted to start out with something simple, going way back in a time machine here. I remember back in the early 90s, late 80s, you wrote a book with Dr. Dobson called Children at Risk, The Battle for the Hearts and Minds of Our Kids.
Right, I sure did.
Yeah, a long time ago. How do you think we've done in that battle since 1990? Are we losing it or winning it?
I think we've surrendered several times here over the years. Look, the book, when we wrote it, worried both Dr. Dobson and myself because it necessarily sounded to some alarmist. We were looking at trends that were well entrenched and that the major media was often ignoring, and we were trying to do our best to wake up average Americans, both people of faith and Americans that may not have a faith basis, but nonetheless were concerned about the breakdown of the family, of values, and so forth. And Dr. Dobson and I agonized over that book. We wrote it, rewrote it again, for fear that we would either sound like we were intentionally exaggerating, or that we might have the effect of discouraging people so much that they would be paralyzed, not willing to take action. The book came out. It was a New York Times bestseller. We certainly were happy about that. We did get a lot of critics who said, mostly from the left, "Oh, come on, this is ridiculous. You're bringing up things that are never going to happen." Dr. Dobson took another look at that book not too long ago, as I did, and we were both relatively shocked at how quaint it sounds now. Not only were the trends then magnified now, but many of the predictions we made about where we were headed have, in fact, unfortunately come true.
You know, it's interesting. I wrote a book, actually that same year, Downfall, Secularization of a Christian Nation, and talking about the values in our society. And I read a part of it the other day, just, picked it up. It was sitting on a shelf. And it's amazing looking back. And you're right, the word trite does fit, because some of the things that we were concerned about then are way beyond that point now with things we're doing in society. It's a little bit frightening.
It is. And, you could even go back before we wrote those books. Interestingly enough, it was a relatively liberal Democratic senator, Patrick Moynihan, who has since passed away, who wrote a book way back in the 70s about the trends on out-of-wedlock births, and said that if those trends continued, they would destroy the minority American community in our country, mostly African Americans, Black Americans. And today, the figures that caused him to write that report and get widely criticized for it are now just a fraction of the out-of-wedlock birth in the minority community. And among Americans generally, the out-of-wedlock birth rate is approaching 50%. So that problem is spread society-wide. We can't find another example of a civilization in recorded history that tried this sort of social experiment of raising large numbers of their children without both a mother and a father. And but we do know enough already to know that by every measurement it is and will continue to be a disaster.
Our guest by phone, Gary Bauer, former president of the Family Research Council.
Gary, just think what that out-of-wedlock birth rate would be if we didn't have abortion.
Well, that's true. Both of those things have gone up in tandem, interestingly enough, and social scientists are still trying to figure out the explanation for that. It is this whole phenomenon is particularly sad. Speaking about the abortion part of it, in that too appears to be a social policy that first took root in minority communities, and groups like Planned Parenthood, for example, for years have been intentionally locating abortion clinics in heavily minority areas where they can, in my view, prey on women in crisis pregnancies who have been abandoned by the men in their lives. And Planned Parenthood specializes in giving these women no choice other than the destruction of their unborn child. It's very fitting that Planned Parenthood would do this because its founder was a eugenist, believed that the lower classes shouldn't be allowed to reproduce. But it's amazing to see liberal politicians today that act like they're on the side of minority Americans praising Planned Parenthood, who specializes in ending the lives of innocent, unborn minority children.
And, you hit it right on the nose, Gary. When you look at Margaret Sanger's early writings, I mean, she intentionally targeted minority areas. There was no question about it.
Yes. And I saw some figures recently out of New York City of the number of women that get pregnant out of wedlock, how many of those babies are destroyed by abortion. And the figures went on. You end up with a very small number of pregnancies in New York City ever coming to the point of the birth of a healthy baby of whatever race, but particularly minority babies. Very, very, very small percentage ever see the light of day. This whole thing, regardless of the color of the skin of the babies, is a national disaster, and it haunts us in ways that I don't think we can even begin to imagine.
I noticed you mentioned something on Facebook about there's a 24-hour wait now in D.C. for tattoos,
yes,
but not for abortions. That's insane.
Right. Yeah, go figure, right? I mean, you have this waiting period for tattoos. So somebody joked, does this mean we've got to stay drunk for 24 more hours? But whatever you think of tattoos, and a lot of young people today get them, it is bizarre that politicians think that is such a serious decision that the law should require waiting for 24 hours before you make it. But they will fight hand and fist any attempt to pass a 24-hour waiting period before an individual can consent to have an abortion.
Even worse than that, the schools can pass out aspirins, cannot pass out an aspirin, but they can send someone to an abortion without any authorization or approval from their parents.
Yep, exactly right. And of course, you all know about the fact the Obama administration caved into a judge and now has put new regulations in place that will allow a very young girl, 11, 12-year-old girl, to go to a drugstore and get access to powerful morning after pills in order to try to destroy the the new human being that might have been conceived the day before. Nobody knows what the long-term implications of those drugs are. Plus, of course, this is a great boom for child molesters and others that can get those pills and then give them to young girls. So we just seem to be in a mad rush to the bottom of the abyss. And in that rush, we appear to be challenging the Founding Fathers, who repeatedly said and almost unanimously said that they believed that only a virtuous people could remain free. They built the whole country on that idea.
You know, Gary, we're definitely going to run out of time, I can tell already. When we get back from the break, I want to talk a little bit about Iran and Syria and Israel with you, okay?
Absolutely.
We'll be back in a moment on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk, 1180.